Welcome to the Culture Coach Podcast with me, Nikki Lerner. I'm here to help you build the skill set of multicultural leadership and find your confidence again and your voice again in an ever-changing multicultural world and workplace. Ready to up-level your skill set? Get certified in multicultural work at the Culture Coaching Lab. Add to your resume and lead with confidence as you get your certification in multicultural leadership and cultural advising. Go there now, culturecoachinglab.com. Come on, let's get into it today. Grace and accountability. Grace or accountability. Depending on what you believe about these two terms will determine how you choose to say that sentence. What most people believe is that when it comes to cultural conversations, when it comes to messing up culturally, saying the wrong thing, putting your foot in your mouth, whatever you want to call it, that there is either grace or accountability. And I believe that where the power comes from in our workplaces and even in our personal lives is when we have grace and accountability. The and is where the truth is. Usually when you see people get really frustrated and really tired is when they have to keep giving something or extending something termed as grace to the people around them. Whether it's culturally based, whether it's racially based, whether it's gender specific, whatever it is, that usually the people in that minority culture oftentimes feel like they are the ones that have to keep giving what is termed grace. Grace can somewhat be termed as a spiritual term. For those of you who are in faith communities, you may use this term a lot, grace. There's a lot of churches named Grace. But this idea of grace, so what is grace? Grace is usually termed as something that you don't deserve. So you do something, or you have a faux pas, you have a moment where you put your foot in your mouth, and what you're asking for from the people around you, and even to the person that was impacted, is grace. What that means is that even though you messed up, what you're asking for is for someone to give you another chance, or to give you some space, or something like that, right? We use this term grace. But oftentimes what that means is that the person who made the mistake, or the people around that person who has made the mistake, is asking for grace apart from accountability. I've had people ask me before, well, isn't the whole point of giving someone grace that they don't have to be accountable? And the answer is no. Just because someone extends grace to you does not mean that you do not have to be accountable for what it is that you did, particularly if it had a negative impact on someone you work with, if it had a negative impact on someone that you lead. You still have to take accountability for it. Usually when people get frustrated around cultural conversations is when they have to keep making grace for people who keep taking advantage of their grace, and then there is no accountability for it. When there is no accountability, usually the onus and the weight is then put on the person who actually was negatively impacted. I mean, when you really think about it, how messed up is that? That person was impacted. That person had the negative impact. And now, without even asking for it, it's almost like the consequences and the accountability for that problem now again all fall on the person who was negatively impacted. That doesn't sound like the kind of grace we are talking about. Grace and accountability, particularly when it comes to cultural issues and cultural conversations. You can choose to give someone what is termed grace and also ask them to be accountable for their actions. If you lead in a workplace and you have had an incident, something has happened, please don't ask people who have been negatively impacted by a situation to only offer what's termed grace to someone else. Yes, we all make mistakes. Yes, we're all going to put our foot in our mouth at some point. Yes, we're going to trip up because none of us know everything. However, that doesn't mean that we don't have to be accountable for the things that we say. If there is a term or a lack of a term that somebody uses in your workplace, or calls someone by a different name or something like that, maybe something they don't know, yes, it's fine to give someone grace, but it's also really important to keep people accountable. Now, how do you give grace and accountability? Well, I think most of us know how to give grace, which is, Bob, we see that you said this thing or you misread this situation. Susan was impacted by it, and we know that it was a problem. Susan has chosen to give you grace. And now we're going to need you to be accountable for it. So here's what we need you to do, right? That's a scenario that you might find yourself in. Now, let me just, before I go into the plan here, your performance tool, I want to be really clear about what I'm not talking about. I am not talking about blatant disregard for people as human. I am not talking about a continuation of blatant sexism, racism, whatever it is that is happening in your space. Okay, that is not what I'm talking about. That needs a completely different focus and a completely different protocol. What I am talking about is sort of your everyday faux pas that you and I are going to make. In fact, do you know that you cannot do culture work? You cannot engage in any kind of cultural change without making a mistake? I don't like that that's true, by the way. You probably don't either, but it's true. I've never met one person that has done any kind of cultural diversity work or cultural work and not made a mistake at some point. We don't need to be afraid of mistakes, but we do need to develop a skill set around how we handle them. And that is grace and accountability. So how do you offer grace and give accountability as well? Here's your performance tool for today. Your performance tool is be specific. Be specific. Number one, be specific about what happened. Number two, be specific about the impact that it had. Number three, be specific about what you are asking as the person who was negatively impacted, but also as the leader, be specific about the type of accountability that will take place or that will happen. Regarding number one, be specific about what happened. Sometimes we can talk so generally about a negative situation that has happened and the impact that it has, that the more general that we talk about it, the less potency it actually has. And for some of you that are leaders, it makes you uncomfortable to talk about it, and that's why you don't get specific about it. But when it comes to cultural issues, you need to be specific. If someone said something that was racist, you need to say it. If someone said something that was sexist, you need to acknowledge it. If there's something that somebody said in your workplace that is causing or making people feel bullied, whatever it is, or not a sense of welcome, you need to be specific about it. Don't generalize. Say exactly what it is, because that's the way that you acknowledge it and you respect it. The second thing is be specific about the impact. This is usually the part where the accountability gets missed, is right away when something negative happens. Our innate response as leaders can be, let's just identify it, let's acknowledge it, and let's keep it moving and move on because we're uncomfortable or we just want the discomfort to go away. And when you take the time to recognize and to be specific about the impact that it has, this actually slows you down. It slows your company down, it slows the organization down, and actually gives people what they normally don't get when they have been offended or if they have been wronged. And that is taking the time to be specific about the impact that it had. When somebody said this to me, this is the impact that it had on me. I was nervous to come to work. I wasn't sure if I could go to that event. I wasn't sure that you wanted me to work here anymore. I wasn't sure that you believe that I could actually do the job that you've hired me to do. Be specific about it. Not only as a leader, ask the question about the specificity, but for those of you who have been negatively impacted, make sure that you too are very specific about the impact that a negative situation has had on you. And the third thing being, be specific about the ask or what the plan for accountability is. Oftentimes we can tell somebody that something happened, and then again, as the one negatively impacted, we can then forget the part that includes the accountability. And a great question to ask there is, what can I expect to be done about this situation? Or ask your leader or your supervisor, what's the plan? What will you do? You can also ask someone who is your leader or your supervisor, when can I follow up with you about this? Those are really great questions to ask, and they're totally on the table for you to ask as someone who works in your organization. Now, as someone who leads, you can take the initiative when it comes to accountability. This is very, very powerful because remember, you are the one with all of the authority. So how can you be even more intentional about making sure that your employees, people that work for you, even people that volunteer for you, know that you're going to handle it? How are you going to handle it? And can you be intentional about telling the person that? You can tell the person that has reported something to you, here's what we plan to do. Here's the date that we are shooting for to make it happen. Here's a really powerful question you can ask the person who is negatively impacted. Would you like to be a part of it? That helps give someone their agency back. This actually happened to me. Where somebody asked me that question after I had an intense moment with someone that was inappropriate in a context where I was. And when I told the leader that I follow about this, one of his questions to me was, would you like to be a part of this when I go address it? And I said yes. And it was transformational in my life. So make sure that you give people a piece of their agency back. It's really okay, too, if that person says no. But let them say no. Don't say their no for them. So as the leader, make sure that you are being very clear about what you plan to do with it. And as a leader, don't forget to follow back up. Even if the follow-up is, here's what we did, here's how it went, didn't go very well, and here's the next conversation that we need to have, whatever it is. But make sure you are very, very specific. What I want to leave with you today is to remember it's grace and accountability, not grace or accountability. You will save the people that work with you and for you a lot of frustration and save them a lot of exhaustion if you handle cultural issues and cultural conversations that negatively impact people this way. Grace and accountability, and make sure that you be specific. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to engage with us today. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. We got you. Take 60 seconds. Go to culturecoachinglab.com. You can go grab your first free mini course, and you can sign up today for our email newsletter. Looking forward to hanging out with you more. We'll see you next week.